There's a lot of content out there in the social media world, especially related to anti-aging content. And considering that I've covered a lot of studies on my main channel on anti-aging, I thought I'd go ahead and rip some of these TikTok videos and see, by reacting to the different claims, see which are somewhat correct, some are completely correct, and some that are really far out there. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Hey, Dr. Barry.
Yeah.
What will age you fastest?
Stress.
What will slow down the signs of aging?
Sleeping. A lot of health related stuff. Exercise, sleeping, sunscreen, not smoking, basic stuff.
Okay, so let me stop there real quick. So far, so good. That's really fantastic answers. I don't think that anybody would have too many issues with any of that, right? Stress is a major contributor to aging. Obviously, not sleeping enough, not exercising, not even necessarily just exercise, just being physically active in general. So if you're sitting down like I am constantly, then just getting out for a walk is going to have a pretty tremendous effect because actually being anti-sedentary, so anti-sitting down, is really the bigger driver. But then if you stack on top of that exercise, it's also going to be great. From a skin perspective, sunscreen, absolutely probably the most potent way of preventing the aging process, because you have intrinsic and extrinsic factors. So intrinsic being your overall aging, reactive oxygen species, different inflammatory molecules and whatnot that can lead to the aging of your body as a whole. And of course, your skin is part of your body, so that's going to age. And then there's extrinsic, which is like the sun, pollutants, things of that nature. So you can eliminate or drastically reduce a lot of that extrinsic aging that comes from the sun by wearing sunscreen or just blocking the sun in some way. Not smoking is obviously fantastic. It's going to prevent you from, or drastically reduce, we'll say, your risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and a bunch of other things. And decreasing sugar intake, obviously sugar, especially if you take it in excess, is also going to be detrimental to your health. So yeah, the basics that he's mentioned so far, fantastic. I'm on board.
Decrease in sugar in your diet. And then we can get into other stuff like, peptide therapy and NAD and skincare.
Okay, so start off really good, then went into peptide therapy. I'm not saying that peptides can't be helpful. I think that we are pretty far off from really understanding as much as we probably should in terms of concrete science on peptide therapy. Looking at NAD, that's going to be something that I have done a lot of research on, and the research is really mixed. It's not as clear cut as a lot of people make it out to be. So would I put that as my second tier? Probably not. And in terms of like other skincare and stuff like that, yeah, there's definitely research out there for other products that could help with skincare. I guess we're kind of slanting things towards skincare on that front.
What's a product you can't live without?
NAD.
Okay, so a product, so you don't typically actually take NAD in its full form, like its present form, the way we're describing it right now. So NAD is a molecule that's found inside of your cells, and NAD is used in a wide variety of different enzymatic reactions. So it allows your mitochondria to function, allows for genes to be repaired. It does a ton of different things. So it is involved in a lot of things, and NAD is absolutely critical to our cellular function, cellular health. However, supplementing with NAD, there's been a lot of problems related to that. So not in terms of health concerns or anything like that, but just the actual intake of NAD. First of all, if you were to just take NAD, then it gets degraded extremely quickly in your bloodstream. It takes, I don't know, we're talking within like seconds, or I believe seconds to minutes, something along those lines. So supplementing with it doesn't really do a whole lot. So what people have been doing is been taking precursors, which are more stable, like NMN or NR. So nicotinamide mononucleotide is NMN, and then NR is nicotinamide riboside. And those then get turned into NAD once they enter into the cells. However, there's, like I said, a lot of mixed literature related to that.
What's a free way to reduce wrinkles?
Stay out of the sun.
What would you cut out of your diet to help your skin?
Actually, you know what? It's even more than free. Stop smoking. That costs you money, right?
Yeah, that's that's definitely a good one.
What would you cut out of your diet to help your skin?
Sugar.
What supplement is your secret weapon?
NAD, or actually NMN. I take it it's a precursor to NAD.
Yeah, so he's touching on this whole NMN concept. The problem with the NMN literature is that a lot of it is preclinical, meaning that it's in animal studies, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that if you can corroborate that in humans. And unfortunately, a lot of the human research, the randomized controlled trials that have looked at NMN, have shown extremely underwhelming results or just no effect of NMN. So unless you play around with the statistics and things of that nature, over 10 studies, I think I analyzed something like 12 studies, and in the NMN literature, it was very weak evidence that NMN actually had an effect. And if it does have an effect, it tends to have an effect for people in their 60s and older, and for people that may have particular pathologies, like let's say they have high blood sugar and whatnot. And even in those situations, the effect is pretty mild. So, and it's varied. So some studies show an effect, some studies don't show an effect. For healthy individuals, let's say if you're like 45 and you don't have necessarily any health issues, NMN did not seem to have much of an effect at all. As in you just don't see any changes. So I'm not as bullish as this doctor on NMN supplementation. But overall, I would say pretty good. Definitely the beginning, I completely agree with. And the second half, I'm a little pickier, I would say. Okay, let's continue with the anti-aging for skin. And then I think I've got some for general anti-aging as well.
The best tips you have for aging overall in lifestyle?
There's technically 5 different ways that I focus on that causes skin aging: nutrient depletion, inflammation, oxidation or free radicals, collagen depletion, and buildup of cellular waste. Now, inflammation and free radicals, big food is a huge part of that. And so what causes inflammation? Sugar. Sugar.
I always love it when people simplify. It's just like, inflammation, which is this massively complex thing. If you were to talk to an immunologist, the sheer complexity, I mean, that's why it's an entire field or subfield of its own, that looking at immunology, looking at inflammation, it's just so funny when people are like, sugar, that is the thing that creates inflammation. It's just that simple. It's just incredibly simplistic. Even if you were to limit it to the skin, it's not just sugar that causes inflammation. Absolutely not.
Can bond to the collagen of our skin and cause the collagen to become prematurely aged.
Okay, so what he's talking about there is called glycation, where you have high sugar levels in the blood or in the cellular milieu, and that then attaches through non-enzymatic means, meaning that it spontaneously just attaches to different proteins and different lipids, fats, different cholesterol molecules, just all around whatever creates the cellular structure. It can attach those and make them less functional. It's like suddenly having this massive weight on you and you're trying to move. It just makes everything a lot more sluggish. It's a very non-scientific way of thinking about it. However, when you're talking about collagen, you're not talking about the cell, you're talking about the actual protein itself. And yes, it is true that sugar molecules can glycate collagen, which can ultimately reduce their functionality. So he's absolutely right about that.
Second thing that causes aging of the skin is with the free radicals and oxidation, and the food that has the most free radicals, ultra-processed foods.
Okay, so I agree that avoiding ultra-processed foods is definitely beneficial for your skin, in general, for general health. The way he's describing it, though, that the ultra-processed foods contain the reactive oxygen species. It's not actually how it works. You consume the food, and then those foods cause reactions within your cells that create then the reactive oxygen species and the oxidative stress. So I would just reclassify how I would think about that, because foods themselves don't contain reactive oxygen species. Those are molecules that are kind of rampant, and they spontaneously happen and they fizzle out very quickly. So you have a constant source, and your body is constantly producing these reactive oxygen species. So we tried to lessen that to kind of a low hum as opposed to a roar. And ultra processed foods, those tend to increase it into a roar.
Free radicals basically damage the DNA of our cells, and the antidote to free radicals are antioxidants. And that's why a lot of people, you go, oh yeah, everybody talks about antioxidants in fruits and vegetables and vitamin C serum for your skin. Antioxidants are the body's response or their protection against free radicals. If you cut those types of foods from your diet, it can really make a big impact on your skin.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. Antioxidants make a tremendous impact, and they are exactly the antithesis of the oxidant molecules like reactive oxygen species. So pretty good. I think he simplified some things that I would not have, and I definitely don't simplify to just sugar, for example, as causing inflammation. There are many things like obesity, just being overweight, being over fat. Saturated fat can increase your reactive oxygen species, or particular saturated fats like palmitate can increase reactive oxygen species. The point is that there are many examples of things that cause inflammation. So I wouldn't label it as just sugar, but aside from that, not too bad. Okay, let's hear about the number one anti-aging food. These are always a bit of a red flag for me, but let's listen anyway.
The number one most anti-aging food is not kale, it's not green tea, and it's definitely not chia seeds. It's loaded with all of the B vitamins, zinc, copper, coenzyme Q10. It has the active form of vitamin A, which is called retinol, which is very important for your eyes, the thyroid, and your immune system, not to mention your skin. It has heme iron, which is the most bioavailable form of iron that prevents anemia and is loaded with collagen and high-quality amino acids, vitamin K2, vitamin E, and even vitamin D. The most anti-aging food in the world is actually grass-fed liver. You can
Aha. Wow. That was a long list of different benefits or different nutrients and whatnot found inside, now that we know, get grass-fed liver. So I don't really have necessarily a beef against liver, but there are many foods that come to mind that I would put well ahead of liver based on the scientific evidence, at least. It is true. So let's talk about liver for a second. It is true that it has high levels of a lot of these nutrients. And in fact, sometimes it's so high that people have to worry about over-consuming. Not that many people are consuming liver, but if you consume liver on a regular basis, you have to worry about some of the fat-soluble nutrients, like vitamin A, for example. You can get, because it's so dense in micronutrients, that some micronutrients build up very quickly in our body and can cause some detrimental effects. We'll just put it that way. So one example of that is, I believe it is vitamin A, but also vitamin E. If it's too concentrated over time, that it can increase your risk for cancer. So it's stuff like that you want to be cautious of. That said, that doesn't mean that liver is bad for you then, right? And it's not necessarily. So you just have to take it with a grain of salt. On top of that, I would also say that the amount of research that is out there on the liver is quite low. So it seems a big leap to me to jump to, oh, well, let's ignore all this other research, like hundreds of studies on these other foods that have just continuously positive health effects. And let's focus on this small body of literature on this food that is very nutrient dense. So I could see the argument. I just don't think that we should say, like, for example, like green tea, it's not green tea. Well, meanwhile, green tea has tons and tons of literature all pointing to it being extremely beneficial for your health. And if you consume a lot of it, like a whole lot, like I'm talking 10, 12 cups a day, the benefits just continue to stack. Like you just keep getting more and more benefits. So could you say that about liver? No, you can't. But I guess on the flip side, you could say, well, green tea doesn't have necessarily the proteins or the same profile of nutrients that liver does. So you could go either way. I guess I would just choose some other types of foods, probably ahead of liver, even though I don't think that liver is a horrible choice or anything like that. Okay, let's get into, I think, probably the last TikTok here. Let's go into age reversal. So we've talked about anti-aging, fighting aging, talked about the foods. Now let's talk about reversing aging, potentially in the next 10 years. How exciting would that be?
It's 10 years from now. It's 2035. Have we reached some state?
Just if you're not aware, the person being interviewed, I don't know who this is, but the person being interviewed is, I'm assuming it says it on the TikTok there. I just can't read it from where I am. The person being interviewed is Dr. David Sinclair, who's an anti-aging researcher at Harvard, I believe.
Of age reversal technology that truly works.
What does the future look like? I think we can either go into the doctor and have an injection of that genetic material and we become transgenic humans that we can turn on these 3 youthful Yamanaka genes, they're called.
Okay. Let me stop there real quick because even just that short bit had a lot of information in it. So he's talking about transgenic humans. What that means is we do this with mice, we do this with animals in general, that we can change their genes. We can literally take out, splice out particular genes, or we can add genes. When we splice out, that's called a knockout. And when we add, it's basically you could call it a knock-in, is one way to describe it. And what he's talking about, the Yamanaka genes, these are particular factors that influence our stem cells. And these stem cells, we can either have cells return to their more youthful state, their more stem cell-like state, or which then can allow them to turn back into another type of cell. Or you can, like I said, convince a stem cell, which is basically a blank slate, to start to mold itself into a different type of cell. So you can convince it to turn into a fat cell or a muscle cell or a bone cell. That's why Yamanaka factors, these particular molecules that are produced, are so powerful. And when they were discovered, I believe they won a Nobel Prize. So it's pretty powerful for sure. And he's talking about injecting these genes that would lead to these Yamanaka factors, maybe on a continuous basis, that could then constantly deprogram your cells. I'm speculating here, but deprogram your cells and then rejuvenate your cells. So your cells, like your stem cells, also have the ability to proliferate, as in they can create new stem cells. They can make copies of themselves, which again have a blank slate, which is so incredible, because then they could be turned into a new cell. So you could reverse a lot of the aging effects, or at least that's the idea.
And every time we want to get rejuvenated or we have an injury, we need to heal quickly, we turn them on. How do you do that? Well, we've engineered it so you can just take an antibiotic for a few weeks. That's what I can see happening with already technology that's going into humans. If we are successful in what we're doing in my lab, these AI-generated molecules are mimicking that. So the reason for having a molecule rather than a gene therapy is not only are they cheap, you can just swallow it and they evenly go throughout the body typically. And so imagine in 10 years, you just take a pill for 4 weeks and you get younger. That's what we're headed towards. And I can see that being realistically possible in the next 10 years.
Wow. Okay. Those are very bold claims. I will say Dr. Sinclair has had other bold claims that have not panned out. Like we were talking about NAD earlier. He is one of the people that was strongly into this whole NAD world and was touting NAD, and he's published studies on NAD. And again, the preclinical models indicated some, life extension effects, all these different positive effects. But then when we tested in humans, even according to some of the recommendations that he offered, I actually read one of his papers in humans on NAD, and the effects were incredibly ho-hum. So, there's the actual science and what his claims are. And I'm not saying he's a bad scientist by any means. Maybe he just gets ahead of himself in terms of what to expect. And I do like that about it. I like the excitement about the future. So in that regard, I really admire that. On the other hand, I think one of the cautions that there are, just speaking as a PhD, one of the cautions of taking a molecule that spreads throughout your body and then equally affects all your cells is that your cells need different treatments based on what they are, right? So, for example, your epithelial cells in your intestinal system, they turn over very quickly. They turn over constantly, but your muscle cells don't turn over. Once you're born with your muscle cells, they stay with you for the rest of your life. So would you want to apply the same treatment to all those cells? Probably not, right? You would want to individualize that treatment. So taking a pill that just applies everything universally across the board is, to me, not a great idea. However, he did mentioned the word AI, and every time you use the word AI, that you know it's good stuff. Of course, I'm being facetious, but maybe there is a way to specialize or to target particular tissues, even when you're just consuming it as a molecule. And there's a lot of other things that we have to consider as well, like, how is it going to get past our stomach acid? How is it going to be absorbed? All that stuff. So I think that 10 years is ambitious, especially considering his previous track record, but I certainly respect the overall thought process. Okay, so we went over a few TikToks. Hopefully that was somewhat entertaining, somewhat interesting to go through, and I'm sure I'll be doing some more in the future. So stick around for that. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in. Catch you in the next one. See ya.